But if there's one thing that you could tell like new entrepreneurs about their lifestyle, or how to adjust, or what would be the one thing that you would want to say?
I would say be super, super intentional and clear on what type of business you want to make. And I don't mean industry necessarily. I mean, do you want it to be a business that gets investors? Do you want it to be a bootstrap business? What are you looking for? And how will that ultimately affect your lifestyle?
This is the Late Night Startup Show, where we sit down with local entrepreneurs, startups, and business owners to dive into their entrepreneurship journey, telling their stories to provide content for them and value to the aspiring. On this episode of the Late Night Startup Show, we are speaking with Darrah Brustein. Darrah is helping her audience and you design your lifestyle, build a business to fund it, and a network to support it. She has an incredible story. She got laid off twice and fired once by a man that essentially was intimidated by her because she's too powerful and too strong of a woman. So from that day forward, she made the decision to live on her terms by designing an intentional lifestyle. Designing an intentional lifestyle that maps to her ambitions and her success, but also stopping and smelling the roses along the way. She loves the process and loves helping others find that fire within them as well. It was a great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. But before we get into it, we have to thank our sponsors, RCR Video Marketing Group. RCR Video is owned by Ray and I. We love helping businesses build brands through video. It is the most effective way to market your company. If you need help implementing video into your company, we'd love to have a conversation with you. Feel free to email us or send us a DM or call us and we can set up a meeting. And if you need an app or a website for your company, hit up Digits in Motion. Rob and his team are just as passionate about helping businesses build their brand through apps and websites, and they do incredible work. So hit up Digits in Motion if you need an app or website. All right, now let's get into this conversation that we had with Darrah. Thank you so much for joining us. I say that every start of the podcast. Like, thank you for joining us.
I hope you say that at the end.
I know, right? Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Let me just start off by saying I'm sorry for the hectic start here. We had a shoot in here, and literally 30 minutes before you showed up, like this was all different. This table wasn't here. The shelves weren't here. We had to reset it all.
I'm impressed.
Because video production is our main hustle, and this is kind of my side project. So it's definitely a side hustle, but I love it. And I love that you are like such an advocate for designing a lifestyle. And that theme just keeps coming up in these podcasts, but not so on the nose. And like you have somewhat figured it out of like, yeah, focus on a lifestyle. So I just want to talk a little bit about your history, what got you to that point, and like how you've been doing that over the past decade of like living intentionally and creating a lifestyle with intention.
Cool. Where do you want to begin?
Let's start. Like, when did you realize that it was
from the womb?
Yeah. When did you realize that like you knew? Like, when did your light bulb go off? I guess
I'd say my light bulb has been on like a dimmer, and it's slowly been turning on over time. But one of the really big turning points for me was getting laid off 3 times in 3 years. I graduated in 2006 from college, which it was Emory. It brought me to Atlanta, which is how we both ended up here.
Yeah.
And after doing the whole adage of go to school, get good grades, get a job, I was waiting for the happily ever after that's supposed to come from there. And unfortunately, that just didn't happen. I took a job in the fashion industry thinking, do the thing you're passionate about. And I knew I was passionate about fashion, and it was miserable. And on top of it being miserable and me thinking, well, I'll work my way out of this at some point, but really I was just comfortable and I wasn't kicking myself in the ass enough to really figure out what the next thing would be. The company went under. It went under about a week before Christmas, 3 months after I bought a house, which I only bought at the tender age of 23 because I had a restraining order against my landlord.
Wow.
So I'm in this position where I'm 23, I have a mortgage, life suddenly slaps me in the face, and I'm thinking, oh, this is grown-up moment here. I've got to figure this out. So over the course of the next couple of years, I took on more jobs, and I was either downsized or let go, or even in one case fired because the owner of the company lied to the board about customers not liking me. As his business partner later told me, it was because he couldn't handle strong women. And apparently I was one in a chain of many that this had happened to. And so after this happened time and time again, I started to realize that I had always wanted to call the shots. I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I'd always wanted to do something for myself. And that everything I had been told and spoon-fed of, well, that's just the millennial in you that's so impatient and it needs to wait its turn. I realized that was bullshit.
Yeah.
And instead, I needed to really take the reins and start to prescribe what I wanted for myself and figure out what those next steps would be, which is when I started to build my first company.
Did that feel like radical in your mind? Like, did you feel like you were just so far out of the norm when you realized that you're going to call your own shots?
It felt really unusual because at Emory, most of my friends were consultants, doctors to be, or lawyers to be. And they all had these really clear linear paths. And here I am floundering and feeling like I'm not making any money and I look like a failure. And here I came out of school with this like prestigious degree and they're all killing it on paper. And here I am really struggling. And so it felt really strange to veer on this whole other path because at the time I didn't have friends who were doing that.
Yeah. So do you think this linear path is created by society or our parents? Like, do you know your linear path or is it a constant battle of trying to figure that out?
Well, I'm a proud flag waver of nonlinear paths because when I look back in my rearview mirror, I have had nothing but nonlinear path. I mean, I started my career in fashion, like I said. I went into high-end home audio video. I was a personal assistant at one point. My first company is in credit card processing. Then my next is in networking events. The next is in financial literacy for kids. And, you know, the list goes on and none of them make sense to anyone else. But to me, there's a commonality underpinning all of them, which is connection. It's connecting people to people and people to resources for the betterment of all of them. But on the surface, it makes absolutely no sense. And I think to your question, I think society, our parents, whoever has influence over us, either really tangibly or more passively, it's this whole American dream or keeping up with the Joneses or the Kardashians in the more modern sense of, you know, these are the demarcations of what success looks like. And I was falling, you know, right along suit with that of trying to get the sexy job and the sexy title and the corner office and the certain amount of money and the white picket fence and the certain flashy things. And while it was really cool at parties to say I worked in fashion, people were really intrigued. I was actually really miserable. And then, as I mentioned, I suffered all of these layoffs and felt totally unstable and insecure in those spaces. So it really does take stopping and addressing, okay, what is it that I actually consider success to look like versus what is society and everyone around me influencing me to believe? And that can take a while to really parse that out and identify what's outside messages versus what do you truly want? Because that often is really hard. I struggled with this a lot, that when you start to think, what do I really want for myself? It's really easy to just think about things you've seen and things people around you that you've admired have done. Or to look and say, well, my dream is just the 2X or the 5X of what I'm doing right now. Instead of really thinking, if there's a blank slate and I got to be the writer of my own life story, what does that look like? And that can be really hard, but that's really where it starts.
Yeah. And there's so many people that are just living day by day. I mean, they have their 9 to 5, or even if they are their own entrepreneurs, they're still, you know, they just let the day happen. They don't take control of the day. So what would you say is the first step into learning how to take control of your day?
Well, intentionality is the baseline of anything, that it's really easy to let life take you with it, have, you know, go with the flow in that way. Like, I actually think going with the flow is a great thing in certain senses. I always say if the stream or the river is taking you down a certain path, don't fight it. That's the universe sort of telling you where to go that way. I don't know how woo-woo you want to get here, but that's sort of the case. And when you feel like you're swimming upstream, you know it's the wrong one. But that's different than going with the flow because you're not ever stopping and doing an internal self-check to say, is this really working for me? Do I really want this? And it's actually everything society is doing is trying to inundate us with busyness and noise and chatter so that we don't have that opportunity. So for some people, it's taking a run or going to the gym or cooking or being in the shower and just using that time to think, or on a long drive, turning off the radio or their podcast. For me, it's meditation. For some people, it's journaling, or it can be a combination of these things, but finding intentional moments to pause and go inward.
Yeah. No, that's incredibly important, I think, because like you think about travel and destination, like to kind of paint a picture, every destination has thousands of ways to get there, right? So it's just about being intentional about the way that you want to get there. But sometimes you may have to stop driving and hop on a plane, right?
Totally.
And change the course. And I think that's okay. I found myself probably about 1.5 years ago, just kind of letting life happen, just going through it. I honestly got too comfortable. We were doing pretty good with business, and with getting too comfortable, I lost sight of kind of the destination. Like I just felt like I had arrived in some sense. And when I got comfortable is when I stopped living with intention. Like literally my to-do list got shorter and like just the most basic stuff. And I found myself going home and watching TV a little more than usual, or not actually still creating a side hustle, which is why this podcast was born. This was like my true 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. side hustle.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I had this conversation with a woman I met yesterday about hoping that I'll never arrive. And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, if I've arrived, then I feel like what's left? I want to always be growing. And if you've arrived, that means that you've already gotten there. So to me, that seems like the end. Yeah. So I hope that I never really get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And is that, I mean, eventually, I would assume in 20 years, if you're trying to build a business, you have to arrive in some sense, but that doesn't necessarily mean stop, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that there's points along the journey. Like you use this beautiful analogy of travel and getting somewhere, which travel is my favorite thing. So I'll definitely use that as a metaphor.
There you go.
So if you're traveling somewhere, like let's say I'm trying to take a road trip from here to California, like you said, I could take the Amtrak, I could drive, I could take the flights, I could take a helicopter, I could do by foot, I could run, like I could bike. There's all these ways to do it. And maybe I do it in different ways at different points. And each of those mile markers can be a moment that I stop and I celebrate and I reflect. And that's getting there. But if all I care about is the final destination of getting to California and I don't enjoy any part of that journey whatsoever, what's the point? Like then I have completely neglected everything that is the only thing we have to count on, which is now. Like I like to say, and I learned this from, I'm going to name drop, from Deepak Chopra, because he and I have a video series together and I've learned so much from him through this process. And one of the things he's taught me in the way that I've synthesized it is that uncertainty is the only certainty. And when that is a reality that you can wrap your head around, it makes you resist a lot less and it makes you actually that much more comfortable in the present because you're willing and able to say, okay, I don't know what's going to happen. My intention is this, but I'm going to hold it loosely. And then I'm going to enjoy the process of getting there.
Yeah. So, my whole podcast is about inspiring, hesitant entrepreneurs, those that are scared to start. And I think, like you just said, they're scared because it's so uncertain. They don't know. But the only thing that is certain is the 9 to 5, the guaranteed paycheck, the 401k, the healthcare. But you just said when you started, you got laid off 3 times or laid off twice, fired once.
Yeah.
So none of that is actually certain. It's kind of false.
Yeah.
You know?
There are narratives and stories that have been fed to us. Like I actually was thinking about this yesterday as well, that we have come from this industrial culture that came after the agrarian society, that now we're really in this information time where we haven't quite adapted our societal narratives. And it's in part because companies still need people to believe them, that you need to believe that there's stability and working for other people. And that's the way to go to have the American dream. Yeah. Because that's starting to shift a lot. It's why I think there's so many entrepreneurs now. And this is not to crap on anyone who works as an entrepreneur or as an employee in a company. Like some people are really wired to do that and we need them. Like we couldn't run our businesses if some people weren't wired like that. Yep. But the difference is that, again, it's this intention thing of how do you really decide, does that work for me? Does that not? And through the entire journey, make this determination of where am I going to find myself here? And I don't know, you get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love what you're saying because it's like 1000% true for entrepreneurs. Live with intention, design that lifestyle that maps to your ambitions, right? But also for those people in the 9 to 5, like they're going to be miserable and resent that job if they aren't going to that 9 to 5 with some sort of intention. So your space and what you're talking about isn't just for business owners and entrepreneurs. It literally relates to every single person on the face of the planet.
Yeah. Every one of us is living a life right now. Yeah. And every one of us gets to choose what steps we take along that path.
So you came through fashion in some sense, and fashion companies, they are creating lifestyle brands, right? And I was thinking about this talk, I think it was last night, and I was like, I think there's a difference between creating a lifestyle brand and designing a lifestyle. But some people may hear design a lifestyle and immediately relate that with a lifestyle brand.
Totally.
Which to me, a lifestyle brand just means being flashy, like the fake entrepreneur showing their fancy watches and renting a Lambo and putting it on Instagram. So what would you say, how do you differentiate the two, like between a lifestyle brand and actually designing a lifestyle with intention?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I don't think lifestyle brand has to be in its basic definition flashy, but often it is. It's a lifestyle brand when marketed to you is very different than the intentionality. I'm going to keep going back to that word of choosing how you want to live your life. How do you want to create it? So someone in a lifestyle brand is saying, okay, you want to live this like Martha's Vineyard lifestyle. You're going to need this stuff for your home and these kitchen goods and these clothes and travel to these places. And this is what your kids' names are going to be. And like they've packaged it all in a perfect little bow for you. The lifestyle design is you saying, hey, I'm attracted to that, but let me stop and decide, what do I actually want to take from here and here and here and here and put together in the equation that I'm going to create my life. It's truly being a painter, an artist, and designing it for yourself rather than just taking it because that's how it's been handed to you.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people, when they start living with intention, it's easy to then also live with more expectations because you're intending on so many different things, or you are like living with intention. I guess I'm blessed that this has never really happened to me. The more that I live with intention, the less expectation I have. But I feel like it's easy when you start living with intention, the more expectation you have. But isn't it important to live without expectations as well?
So this is going to sound super Buddhist, but I mentioned it a little bit before that I think it's important to have an intention and have a destination in mind, but then to release the expectation of the way that that plays out. And this also, I think, really helps to resolve a lot of resistance that can come up in relationships or as things unfold. Because if I have the expectation that you're going to ask me a certain question next and you don't, I'm probably going to get a little annoyed. But that's useless because I have no control over what you're going to ask me. It would be much more in my own benefit to just sit here and let that happen. And that's just this tiny microcosm of an example. But it's the same thing that if I have an expectation that, you know, we're going to bring on 30 new clients in the next 30 days and we bring on 28 and I go apeshit because we missed 2 and I was holding so tightly to that outcome, then I've missed the fact that, wow, we brought on 28 new clients in 30 days. And so everything is about perspective. Everything is about the way that you look at it. And there has to be a releasing of the way that it works, because often I think if we're honest with ourselves and we look back at the way things have worked in our lives, it's often the things that we were kind of pissed about. Like I was so angry when I got laid off and fired. I was like, how dare they? I've been putting my blood, sweat, and tears to this. I'd even hit a 3-year sales goal in 10 months in the first company. And I'm thinking, this is not what I wanted. This is not what I asked for. This is not how I envisioned this. And now I look back and I'm like, thank God that it happened that way. Because if I didn't have my butt kicked that many times in that short amount of time, I probably wouldn't have taken the leap and started my own stuff. So you have to look at it as, what's the lesson that I can learn here? Trust that there's some sort of silver lining. Trust that this is opening a door or a window for something else. And that sounds pretty like Pollyanna, but just look back for evidence in your life of when that's been true to understand to just keep doing that.
And looking back on evidence is important because a lot of people, and I did this too, I beat myself up behind getting like angry about certain things like that, like being laid off. I never like really got laid off, but I worked in jobs that were miserable and I would always be pissed at the supervisors. And it's okay to be pissed and angry, right? Because that's how, when you look back on it 10 years later, you remember being pissed and angry, like, okay, I could have reacted differently. But you have to have the ups and downs and the plethora of emotions in order to learn from the good emotions and the bad emotions.
Totally.
And when you were saying, you know, the expectations and conversations, it literally, like, I got some chills when you said that, because I thought about 3 or 4 different business calls that I've had with clients over the past month, and they would ask me a question. I'm like, fuck, that's not what I wanted them to ask. Damn it. And then I'll be talking to Ray, like, you know, if they would have just did this and that and this and that. But what you just said is like, why was I expecting them to ask that?
Yeah.
Well, I should have no expectations in that.
Totally.
So, and here I am saying I live without any expectations at all. And you just called me out on it.
I think, well, you're welcome. I think that it's really hard to live without expectation. Like we are not enlightened. It's why we're still here. We're still on a journey to figure it out and learn and be better. But this is going to be like the drinking game about the intention of, okay, great. At least I can check myself and realize that's an area where I haven't figured it out yet.
And also being willing to say you don't know, or being willing to say, let me get back to you, or I don't have the answer, or not knowing what to do is intentional. And I think that's huge. I was a big Dave Ramsey fan. I still listen to him every now and then.
You.
Yep. So and you know, that's one thing he says is like, saying no or saying you don't know is intentional. don't get it confused with being as if you're not prepared enough or not knowledgeable enough. But being transparent is being intentional. Being honest is being intentional.
I have a lot more respect for people who are transparent in those ways. If you say to me, I don't know, let me get back to you in 24 hours, and you get back to me in 24 hours or less, great. Yeah. I would much rather trust that you're going to be upfront with me and that you're going to follow up. And actually, it gave me more insight into your character and your working style.
Yeah.
So I love that. And I love what you're saying about saying no, because especially as women, just me, that it can be really hard to say no. We have been socialized to be pleasers and to say yes, when really, when you say yes to everything, you're really watering down your commitments instead of saying, these are my priorities. This is what I'm going to say yes to and make space for energetically and time-wise.
Yeah.
And when I say no, I'm actually doing you a service because I wouldn't be able to give my all to you. And sometimes there's ways to say no where you're actually able to put them in a better position. Where I have a friend, she runs the company Bright House. And she says every time she lays someone off or fires them, she helps them find their next job.
Yep.
Because she's like, I want to leave them better off, even if it's not a fit here. And so if someone reaches out to me and asks me the dreaded, can I pick your brain question? Unless they're just kind of an ass, I'll typically at the very least be like, hey, have you checked out this resource that I've published? Or have you read this book? Have you heard of this? Even if I'm not going to say yes to their ask, because at least there's something that I can give them. And that, I don't even think the message here is you have to do that.
Yeah.
But I want to be treated the golden rule. Like, how would I want to treat people in a way that I would want to be treated if they were in my shoes? And I think some of those things are really simple and basic, and that putting that kind of goodness out, I just believe that it comes back to you.
And that all maps back to like your experience with being pissed when you got fired or laid off. We had a woman in here as a assistant editor for us, and she was kind of building her own business and all that stuff. And, you know, we were letting her use some space, not paying rent or anything, but we had an agreement that, you know, certain things would happen, and those things didn't end up happening. So we adjusted, and I said, well, how about you edit my podcast for me and the micro content for my podcast? And unfortunately, she missed like a couple of the deadlines I gave her, and it got put on the back burner. And instead of getting pissed and being like, okay, get your shit and get the fuck out, I was like, she probably missed those deadlines because she is still trying to figure out exactly how to build her thing and how to focus on what she wants to do and be happy with herself. And the last thing I want to do is put this monotonous work that she probably isn't passionate about or can't even get passionate about because she doesn't have her own shit figured out yet. And she was upset. She got pissed at me, but I kept thinking like, hopefully a year from now, she'll look back on it and be like, you know what? He was looking out for me.
I believe that happens. I had a situation maybe 3 or 4 years ago where I hired a friend's company to do all of our marketing and digital media stuff, which, you know, there's a lot of conversation around, should you hire friends? Should you work with friends? I have both hired friends and work with friends, some to much success, some to much failure. I don't think that there's a common baseline of do it or don't. I think you've got to trust your instincts. But it was a terrible disaster. It was horrific. Nothing went well. It ended our friendship. He came at me in a lot of ways that I really had a hard time understanding why he was responding to me as the client in the ways that he was, when I actually felt like I was just asking for what he had promised lined out in the contract. Then circle back to about 6 months ago, I ran into him at a festival in Atlanta, and he said, you know what, I've been meaning to reach out to you. I owe you a huge apology. I was going through these things you didn't know I was going through, and I shouldn't have taken it out on you in those ways, and I'm immensely sorry. And it was one of those moments where I was like, wow, I didn't need that, but it was so clarifying to know that we just don't know what people are going through. And it was really painful for me to experience the wrath of it at the time. But all I knew is that I could trust my own intention and my own actions, and I couldn't control his. All I could control was ending the contract because it was driving us both insane. And then I was grateful that he circled around, but it just kind of gave me this strong reminder that we have to know that we're not always going to know everything on the other side, and to let that be what it is.
Yeah. It's like so true, because I'm going through that right now with some friends that I was working with in the past, and I'm going through it in both directions. Like there's that one friend where I need to talk to and be like, look, I was going through some stuff. I'm sorry. Like I put way too much on you and took advantage of you. Let's just be real. But then there's another friend that I'm like, okay, dude, you can go fuck yourself, because you were taking advantage of me and like trying to get certain things out of me with like, anyway, I won't get into it, but it's funny that, you know,
therapy. Keep going.
Right. You can go both directions in those situations. Like it happens both ways.
Absolutely.
But I think it is important to still circle back around, or at least find some sort of, not necessarily closure, but clarity in those situations, because it weighs heavy on my conscience. Like all I wanted was for like my core friends to be successful with us. And the more that we got successful, the more difficult those friendships got to maintain. And I put all of that on my own shoulders. Like I thought it was all because of me. I thought I was the one getting told that I was an aggressive asshole and all this stuff. And I'm like, don't mistake my passion for aggression.
Totally.
And don't mistake my passion for your career as aggression either, when I see that you could be doing things to help you and you're not.
Totally.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. It shows a lot about your character that you're able to also look for the, you know, chip on your own shoulder, or the thing that might be the flaw that you have. Because every time someone pisses me off, or I feel like so irked by something that they're doing, I try to stop for a second and be like, why is this really annoying me? Like, what is this actually saying about me? Because we're all mirrors for each other. And sometimes I'm like, they're truly just an asshole. And I don't think that that's a reflection. But oftentimes there is something where I'm like, oh, I get that. I have that in me. I totally understand. And while I still don't condone it and I'm not acting on it, it helps you take those moments and reflect. And I really commend that you're doing that.
Yeah, I'm trying to. But it kind of circles back around to what you were saying too, like on these trips or these journeys to the destination, when you stop and pause at those mile markers, to me, it's easy to stop and pause and think about all the negative shit. I mean, I did that. I'm a worst case scenario. I'm a super cynic. And this is why, like we were talking before. We were talking about the whole Gary Vee thing and before we started. And I was like, the whole positivity constantly just doesn't vibe with me.
You're I need some grit.
I know it's positive. I know it's helpful. And I know like getting back to that mindset at the end of the day is super beneficial. Like you can't stay a cynic, but literally I put myself in a situation. I was like, I'm a worst case scenario guy all the time anyway. So I'm going to like be obsessive about that and go to the extreme just so I can get it out of my mind. So when I think about the worst case scenario now, instead of like harping on it and thinking constantly about it, I like step it up a notch. Like I take that worst case scenario and times it by 10 and then I'm done with it. So it's weird that it's like even your not so positive things or things that aren't necessarily strengths in the end game, you have to figure out how to hack that for yourself and be beneficial for yourself. And I figured out that like listening to Gary Vee and trying to just change my super worst case scenario mindset to positivity just wasn't working. The only thing that did work was to make worst case scenario even worse. And then I was over and done with it.
Well, I think there's misconceptions that we're not supposed to feel all our emotions, that we are supposed to be these like Susie Sunshines all the time. And that's bullshit. There's a study I read years ago that talks about people's emotional set points. And I think I just naturally sit right of center where I'm always content. It takes a lot to get me really excited. It takes a lot to get me really down. Whereas there are some people that are wired at the 10 where they're always on top of the world. And to me, that feels really weird and fake because it's not my existence. But to understand that there's a spectrum of emotions for a reason, we're allowed to experience and feel all of them. It's never healthy when we dwell in a lot of the ones that bring us down. But that's the entire reason that they exist, is so that you can feel them and move through them.
And it's interesting because you said, you know, we're moving out of this industrial age into this technology or information age. And I feel like the more we get into this informational age, the more we have to be emotionally smart. Versus when it was more industrial, it was more like just intellectually follow the process.
Use your hands, get the job done.
But it's crazy that the more information that becomes available, the more emotional we all are in some sense.
Totally.
When you think that would bring more clarity to eliminate emotions. It's weird, right?
Yeah, it's a complicated time.
It really is. It really is. But what I was getting at is like when you stop and pause, and I've been really trying to practice on this, is like stop to smell the roses sometime, not just to look at all the shit or the negative, or like before you start the journey again. Sometimes it's okay just to start not knowing exactly how to adjust, right?
Absolutely. I literally used to have on my list of goals, stop and smell the roses, because I watched myself blaze through everything, constantly trying to check off the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I was like, wow, that's like kind of depressing that I had to write that on my to-do list.
I'm the same way. Like a buddy of mine, he out of nowhere just sent me his gratitude list like 2 days ago. And I was like, oh, nice. That's cool. And he was like, where's yours? Write it. Take 10 seconds right now and write 10 things that you're grateful for. And I was like, all right, it's kind of weird. And I interrupted my whole day, but I I did it, and we've done it. Like, I've sent him a picture of mine. He sent me pictures of his every single day now.
That's awesome.
I mean, it's only been like 2 days, but
it's powerful, right?
Super powerful.
It immediately shifts your mindset from the things that are not working or just focusing on the past or the future to getting you so present and thinking about, I have so much to be thankful and grateful for.
Well, and it's tough. Like, it's a list of 10 things. It has to be 10 every day. And I was like, oh yeah, I can do 10, whatever. And then like I get to number 5, I'm like, shit, what are the other 5? Like, what exactly am I grateful for?
I'm breathing. I get to work.
I was like, Diet Coke, energy drinks.
But it's
like,
real.
Yeah.
I mean, when I like pulled up to a spot in the front of your building, I was like, hell yeah, like spot right in the front. And it's like those tiny things that you're like, yes.
Super grateful
Small
for.
wins.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important to be grateful for the small things too. Almost more important, I would say.
I agree. I think it's more important to focus on the small stuff because the big stuff are few and far between. And it's a thing that when we chase them, they don't usually feel as great as we expect them to.
Yeah.
They're those like really, high level moments like, oh, when I have my first kid, when I get married, when I get engaged, when I graduate, when I sell my company, when I, it's the chasing of the when. It never feels the way you think it's going to.
But you're talking about designing a lifestyle, which is big. Like that's big picture. That's huge, right? But when you're talking about it, it's all about the small things, the small steps. So how do you communicate that? Because I feel like some people may see your website and be like, okay, lifestyle, yeah, everyone's whatever. But really, when you get down into it, it's like, no, you're designing a lifestyle by these little stepping stones, like tiny stepping stones daily to get you there.
Totally. I mean, everyone acts like there's this, I call it the American Idolization effect of entrepreneurship. And I'm using that as an example because I know you and I both are and your audience is, where you're the company that's in your garage and then 3 months later, Facebook bought you for $1 billion. So like, obviously I'm talking about Instagram in this case, but there are these unicorn stories that are called unicorns for a reason because they're fictitious and they're so few and far between when they exist, that we often think like that's the goal and that's the metric for success.
Yeah.
When instead it's like, well, 99.999% of the time, it's these companies and these people who work diligently day after day and just put in the work because they actually enjoy the process.
Yeah.
And then they look back and they're like, oh, look at all this progress I made. Yeah. And you don't realize in the movement of it in the baby steps. And it's often too, like a lot of entrepreneurs, you talk about this with, this is who your audience is, are so afraid. We are so afraid to start or move or try something new or fail in front of people or just fill in the blank for whatever it is. But really it comes down to movement. Movement, I think, is the thing that crushes the fear because you're too focused on what you're doing. And it's the thing that quiets those voices in your head and is like, those are all bullshit lies. Because not only am I demonstrating it to be false, but also we talked about evidence before. I can look back at the evidence and think, where is there any evidence to support this stuff that my head is telling me? Yeah. Your head wants you to stay still. It wants you to stay in homeostasis. It doesn't want you to grow. But like any muscle, it takes some tears and it takes practice. It takes going to the gym of whatever that means in this circumstance to make it grow. Yeah. And that's not always enjoyable. But then you look at your muscle later and you're like, damn, I got a 6-pack.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I always say, like all things bad or negative exist, whether good exists or not. But good and positivity cannot exist without negative or bad. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like you said, it's all about practice,
Black
exercise.
Doesn't exist without white. Good doesn't exist without bad.
Yeah, exactly. But like I said, negativity or bad can exist on its own. And like you said, our mind, it wants to just sit around and watch TV. It wants to just be pleasured all day long. And it doesn't want to actually go through the work. So unless, once again, like you said, the drinking game, unless you're living with intention, then your mind's just going to stay in that state. And it's okay to fall, out of that state sometimes. Like I did last year. I went through a really rough patch, 3 months of not doing a single fucking thing. And eventually I got out of it. And how I got out of it was one day I woke up, I was like, I want to make a to-do list today. And like that to-do list was like, get out of bed.
Yeah. And
like,
then it's
seriously.
those micro steps.
Exactly.
No, I think it's so good. I love that you're saying that.
Yeah. So one documentary, I forget the name of it. I think it was called Heal, Heal, documentary that I watched.
Deepak's in it.
What was that?
Deepak's in it.
Yeah. So this documentary, it talked about how our lifestyles are designed for failure or for these kind of just mundane, routine, like bad lives, unhealthy lives. And it even went to the depth saying, like, when you walk into people's homes, all of their chairs and couches are turned towards the TV, the remote's on the armchair. There's, like, you're as your life is set up to go in, grab a bowl of candy that's on the counter, not the fruits in the drawer in the refrigerator. So you grab candy, you sit down, recline back, hit the remote, and all this stuff. So this may be a little extreme, but I've been advocating for people to turn their chairs away from the TV, take the batteries out of the remote, put it under the sink somewhere. Because as long as you are intentional about changing those habits, like take the remote out, make it an inconvenience to be lazy, because those things aren't good for you. That's what makes you want to keep up with the Kardashians and stuff, is because you're surrounding yourself by that lifestyle.
Right. I mean, any inputs you're putting in your mind are the things that are going to influence you. It's why the people you surround yourself with are so important.
Yeah.
Because if they're doing the same thing, what's going to motivate you to change?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're hanging out with people like you or whoever that are going to motivate you and up-level you and make you feel inspired to be better, do better, that's when shit actually happens. Like it's really hard to do when you're a lonely island doing it yourself while everyone else around you is in the bad habits.
Yeah. And I take a lot out of like musicians, artists. Like one of my favorite artists is Mac Miller, who unfortunately passed away. But one thing he says in his song is like, the more you do, the less you wait. And like when he says it, when you listen to it, you're like just vibing to the music and it just kind of breezes by. But I heard it like for real the first time the other day. I heard this song 1,000 times, but for some reason that stuck out. I was like, it's so true. You just start. Like the more you start doing, the less you're going to wait to get to where you want to go. Yeah. So if you know that you don't want to be where you are, you don't have to have the destination in mind. You just have to start doing.
Yes, that's such an important thing to debunk, that entrepreneurs especially, or I think humans, we think we have to know what the end is. I think it's important to have an end in mind when you're doing something, but you don't have to know. It's why I think lean methodology has become so popular, that there are iterations in business, there are iterations in life, and that you just have to start acting. Because if you try to wait till something is perfect or you know so well, not only is that going to be that much more daunting to try and tackle because you have this perfect image that you have to get exactly right, but you've wasted so much time and you've lost momentum, which is really hard to pick back up.
Yeah. So when people like you and I are talking about this, it sounds just so on the nose, like not necessarily easy, but so clear.
Not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy at all. So why is that? Like, why do some people listen to us talking like, yeah, that's right, they're right. And then other people are like, I don't know. That doesn't feel right to me. I'm going to turn that off and turn on my TV.
It's a lot easier to be a naysayer than it is to be a person of action.
How do you, because I know you're about influencing people to change their lifestyle and like design a life that for their own success. So how does that look like in your business when you're communicating to your audience to influence them to change?
Well, a lot of it I think is just being real and truthful and saying, it hasn't always been pretty for me. There's still shitty moments. I don't always know. I'm still evolving. I'm figuring it out, that I'm in the trenches with you. I think that's important. Like, I never want to come off as I've got this all figured out and totally on lock and I'm some like perfect guru. It's not that at all. It's, hey, I can only help you because I'm in it and I've been in it and I've been paying attention and I've accumulated all of these resources that 99% of them are free because I just want to help you because I understand what it's like. And I'm in a position now where I have the time and financial freedom to do that. And I think the responses I've gotten are always, thank you for being real and relatable and authentic and telling us the real truth. Because for me, I can't relate to someone who's just looking down from the mountaintop and being like, hey, what's it like down there, tiny people? I got this all figured out. Meet me when you figure it out. It's like, no, like we've got to pull each other up. And that takes being real and vulnerable to do that. Yeah.
This may be a little extreme, but it's almost like, you know, an AA program for life. Like,
totally. You have to first admit you have a problem.
Admit it. Exactly. Yeah. And most people don't want to admit it because of embarrassment or fear of being looked down upon by their peers or, you know, even people they don't know. Yeah. It's like, you know, everyone's gone through some stuff. Everyone has their own baggage and their own shit. And like, as soon as you admit it, you're really scared of your friends, colleagues, family, but almost even more fearful of what like just a stranger on the street's going to say if they find out about it because they don't know anything about you.
Isn't that ironic that we often care so much more about strangers' opinions of us than the people who actually know us, love us, care about us, and vice versa? Yeah. But the thing that I learned through, this was one of the fears that really held me back when I was starting my business, was what if I fail publicly? What are people going to think? And I'm veering on this path that none of them are taking. Are they going to be looking down on me and judging me? And I came to realize that even the people who love you, people aren't paying nearly as much attention as we think. And it's actually kind of egotistic and narcissistic to think people are paying that much attention, even in our highlight reel social media world. It's like, just don't post it then. Like, keep on moving. People are here to cheer you on and support you. They're not here to celebrate your failures. And frankly, nothing is a failure if you keep going.
Yeah.
I think it's a Lincoln quote that I'll totally ruin, but it's something like, success is one step after failure, but most people stop at the failure. And if you just keep going, it wasn't a failure. It was a pivot point.
Yeah. And like you said, we are kind of narcissists and egotistical if we think that people actually give that much, like care that much about us or give a shit about us.
And that doesn't mean people don't love us. But like, they're not watching our every step and our every trip.
But it just means that love wins, right? I mean, so I don't know if you know much about the whole Nipsey Hussle situation, but he's an artist that, you know, got shot in California. He was doing a ton for his community. And actually Gary Vee of all people were like very close friends with him. And Gary Vee put out a video of Nipsey Hussle talking. He was like, you know, we have the power to destroy Earth. We all have nuclear bombs. We could literally kill every human at the click of a button. But then there's a reason why Drake is the biggest hip hop star. And when he started out doing all these love songs, you're the best I ever had. And then he just skyrocketed. And that's like, he's way more successful than the gangbanger rapper or whatever. And that's because love and positivity like does win long term over and over. And if you look at society and like the mainstream, that really is the biggest of the big, that is what they're preaching, right?
You're right.
I mean, even Gary Vee.
It's the common denominator. It's the thing. We are all looking for love. We are all looking to be seen. We're all looking to be someone that is noticed, that people care about. Like, and that doesn't have to be by the world. I think this is what people get so confused about fame. Like, we live in this culture now where everyone's like, I want to be Instagram famous. I want to be a YouTube star. I want to be the next reality star. And unless there's a real why behind that, and there's some, in my opinion, unless there's a why behind it and some sort of service you're doing through the platform you're creating, then it's completely self-serving. And you're thinking that's where you're going to find love, when really, I'm friends with a lot of people who are famous, and they will tell me time and time again, it is lonely at the top. You don't know who to trust. If you think this is where love is going to come from, you are mistaken. Like, did you by any chance watch the Netflix documentary that Paris Hilton put out that features she and the Fat Jewish and a bunch of other Instagram celebrities? And it is so sad. She goes on to say something along the lines of, I'm so sad and alone. The only people who I think truly love me are my fans. And she feels so disconnected. And you're like, wow, you have multi-billion-dollar empire. You've got friends and family. And you think the only people who truly love you are these people who are liking and commenting on your stuff. And it's such a bummer, because it really is this common denominator. We all just want to be loved. And it is why it resonates with us, even if we're cynics and we're people who don't realize that's what we're being attracted towards and gravitating towards.
And it's accepting that life is a constant contradiction, because even our last 10 minutes of conversation, someone could pick apart and say it's contradicting from minute 2 to minute 6, right? We're talking about not caring about what people think on Instagram and all that stuff. And then also, you know, that like those people don't give a shit about us at the end of the day. But then we turn around and say that, you know, love always wins. And then you search for that love.
I mean, nothing is that simple. Like everything is on a spectrum and everything is multifaceted. And so just as you were saying, as we say, people aren't paying that much attention, they don't care. It doesn't mean that they don't care, like with a capital C. It just means they're not paying attention to every moment. I had a friend, for example, this weekend text me and she said, you were one of 2 people who reached out to me on my birthday. And she's like, 3 months ago when my dad died, everyone was reaching out, acting like they're my friend. And now 3 months have passed. It's my birthday. And it's like, no one cares and is there for me. And I tried to assure her, I was like, you know, honestly, all those people really do care and love about you. They're just so caught up in their Saturday that they're not looking on Facebook and not seeing that it's your birthday, and they didn't take didn't have the wherewithal to put it in their calendar. But it's those little things that, you know, they can hurt us and they can really uplift us. But at the end of the day, people do care, but they don't care on the micro ways and all the ways that we think that they do.
Yeah, that's exactly true. So if there was one thing that you could tell entrepreneurs, or 3 things, let's be real, like there's never just one thing. Yeah. But if there's one thing that you could tell like new entrepreneurs about their lifestyle, or how to adjust, or what would be the one thing that you would want to say?
I would say be super, super intentional, drink, and clear on what type of business you want to make. And I don't mean industry necessarily. I mean, do you want it to be a business that gets investors? Do you want it to be a bootstrap business? What are you looking for? And how will that ultimately affect your lifestyle? Because like, for example, I have two brothers. One is my business partner. The other has his own company in San Francisco. My twin and I have always bootstrapped our business, and I have done that with all of my subsequent businesses. Whereas my older brother has Series C, 60 plus million raised. He has 90 or 100 employees. He's got global investors. He's got people to answer to.
Yeah.
And he's got 2 kids and a wife at home. And he is not living the life that I choose. And even at times, I think if he were being honest, he would say it's not really the life he would have chosen if he had thought enough steps ahead. And so the thing I would say to someone is make sure you're doing something that will really uplift and allow for what you want your life to be like, to grow, instead of allowing your life to fit into the nooks and crannies of what's left after your work is done.
Yeah. That's so important, because I haven't even thought about that. Like these people that are out there raising millions of dollars for their money, are they really like entrepreneurs? Like they have everyone to answer to. They have all those investors to answer to, and then their employees to answer to that they hired based off of that money. But is there a legitimate business there? I feel like bootstrapping is the most pure form of entrepreneurship, because you do have the ability to say no or yes to whatever you want to, versus as soon as you take that investment, you kind of have to answer to them, right? You got people to
answer to. Yeah. And not to, like, I think they're all entrepreneurial. However, it's just, I have no interest in going to sleep at night being afraid for the livelihoods of 100 people and all these investors that I have to pay back in multiples. And for some people, they thrive in that environment. And so great. But it, again, comes down to starting by thinking, what do I actually want? Is that going to be in service to this life or not?
Yeah. Yeah. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given from? Because I mean, you're a very strong woman. You like,
thank you.
It sounds like, you bootstrap your companies. You've never been afraid to just, go for it and all that. And I find I'm very much the same way, except I'm not a woman, obviously. But I feel like,
is that obvious?
Yeah. I feel like people like us, it's hard to take advice. Like, there's been so many times where people have given me true advice and I didn't listen to it until something happened with me. I'm like, oh yeah. No, this is the advice I want to give. Not even realizing that I was given 5 years ago. So what is there like one piece of advice that someone has given you that has just resonated?
There's been so much, and I've shared some of it already. And I'll say one of them, actually, the first time Deepak and I connected before we developed our friendship, he said to me, Darrah, if you're not happy now, you'll never be happy. Mm-hmm. And it really made things super, super clear for me, where I was like, oh, you're right. Like, because it went back to that chasing. And another thing that I remember learning early on, I don't remember who gave me the advice, was that I had to be my own savior. And I don't mean this in any sort of religious sort of context, but I mean it in this way of, I can't sit around and wait for a thing like Oprah's greatest things list to come around, or for some celebrity to come and endorse something, or for, the clock to strike this exact hour while the moon hits here and this, and suddenly everything explodes. Like, that I had to be the person who was pushing the ball forward over and over and being my own biggest champion, instead of waiting for this knight on a white horse to ride in and make everything perfect and work. And honestly, that became a bit of an excuse of, well, until I have that or this or that, then it's just never going to happen. That's a load of bullshit. Yeah. That stuff happens after you are your own hero and you're the one pushing everything along.
You know what you just defined and described?
What's that?
At the beginning of the podcast, you said, your light bulb didn't just go off, it dimmed up.
Yeah.
It's like what you just said is exactly the true definition of that light bulb dimming, right? Or dimming up, is because it's a process, and it's not, you're not waiting for that Oprah or whoever or Gary Vee just, oh yeah, that's what I need to do.
Totally. Well, and what's hilarious is now I'm in a position where every week Deepak and I put out this video series, and he has millions and millions of fans and followers. And I knew going into it, I was like, if I go into this thinking this is going to be the moment that my shit blows up, I'm going to be really disappointed if it doesn't. So like we talked about earlier, I held to it really loosely. And stuff has grown, but it's not been in this monumental way. And I'm so glad that it's worked out the way that it has, and that I didn't have any expectation, again, going back to that conversation, that it just is what it is. And that I was able to just enjoy the foundation of it, which is spending time with Deepak every single week and learning side by side with him as a friend and a mentor, as opposed to expecting it to turn into some sort of cataclysmic business event.
Yeah.
Which, even if that's the thing I was waiting for, and I would have been sorely mistaken to find out, well, that didn't even do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been great. It's a great conversation. I feel like I could talk for hours to you because it's like kind of therapeutic, but also like very informational and like just tried and true advice. But I also want to give people a way to find you. So where can they find you, your free resources and on social?
Yeah, I welcome everyone to hop to my website. It's just darrah.co, darrah.co. There's lots of free resources on there. I'll name some of them. There's a free masterclass with Deepak and I on living a more meaningful life, which has a guided meditation. There is the 55 best questions to ask to break the ice and really get to know someone, which is really profound when you're trying to break through just the standard what do you do question and build relationships, because they truly are the things that open the doors to the success you're seeking.
Yeah.
There's one on the 6 best steps for more effective goal planning. And there's one on the shit no one tells you about starting a business, which for a lot of your listeners, I think might resonate. Yeah. And then depending when they listen to this, I'm going to be running a contest in the next few days for the remainder of April, offering a kind of design your life getaway with a 3-night stay at this spa and resort at this place called Savannah in Arizona, and a bunch of other cool stuff to really help them pause and reflect and figure out what their next best steps are.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I think the audience will get a lot out of that. I'm not sure if this will be out by the end of April, but
sorry,
but that's okay. I'm sure there's more in the works.
There's always free stuff there.
And they can keep up with you and figure out what's coming next. I guess in a nutshell, to summarize, it's to the audience, it's figuring out, coming to the resolution that it's your life. It's your life to design and to style. It's your life to live with intention and to create your own journey. And there's never going to be that someone else's journey that is the aha moment for you. Is just a gun going off at the start line, maybe. But at the end of the day, you have to run your own race. The only way to get to that finish line is to live with intention, right?
Damn, who said all that? That sounded so smart.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. You just boosted my ego. No, I'm kidding.
Good Cliff's Notes.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for being here. And it's great content. I can't wait to cut this and put out little micro pieces too.
Awesome.
So I'll be sure to send those to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for listening to yet another podcast or watching. Whether you're listening or watching, please do us a solid and leave a review, comment, and subscribe. This helps us a ton when it comes to getting more sponsors and keeping this thing sustainable. So do us a solid. If you're enjoying all of this, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. And if you need any help with implementing video into your company, don't hesitate to give us a call, email, or DM at RCR Video, or email me directly, randall.blizzard@rcrvideo.com, RANDALL. Be sure to check out Darrah. She has some incredible free resources on her website. It's Darrah, like Sarah, but with a D, DARRAH.co. Go to our website, check her out there. Also on Instagram, Darrah B, DARRAHB. That's her Instagram handle. So be sure to check her out. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. See you next time.